going to start off this shoulder stretch sequence, guys, with the banded lat stretch. This is one of my favorites. We're going to step back so we got nice tension in the band, nice neutral spine. We're going to let the band pull our arm forward. As you can see, I'm stretching my right arm in this one, so I'll shift my hips over to the left. That gives me a nice deep stretch down that lat. In the event I don't want to move my hips over, I can also step the right leg back behind. You can just switch sides for this to make it work on the left side as well. Personally, what I like to do though, stretch the right arm up, I'll move my hips over to the left. If you're having trouble keeping that palm up, you can see where I take my hand, place it on top of my right hand to keep that thumb up. Now here you'll see where I have a bent elbow. Don't let that elbow bend. Let the band pull you. Don't pull the band itself. From here, we're going to move into a banded chest and shoulder stretch. You'll see I'm just secured into the band, stepping forward with a lot of tension, getting a nice stretch throughout my chest and shoulder right here. Now, the big key to this one also, guys, is not to bend the elbow. You'll see how it loses tension and a lot of pressure and stretch that we're getting throughout that shoulder and our chest. You see here with this bent elbow, we want to stay away from that. You want to have fully extended, turning away from the band as much as possible to get a nice deep stretch. The next stretch in this sequence is the banded shoulder stretch. This one's fairly the easiest in the sequence. We're going to secure ourselves into the band, locking our arm out overhead, stepping in, a lot of tension in the band, pulling our arm back behind us, getting a nice deep stretch throughout the tricep and shoulder. The final stretch in this sequence is going to work on our tricep and lat a little more. We're going to secure ourselves into the band at our elbow. We're going to step in, allowing the band to pull us back again, keeping the elbow close to the head. As you'll see right here, this is what it looks like when the elbow is away from the head. You don't quite get the stretch on it. Make sure the elbow is secured close to the head, straight up and down, to get a nice deep stretch down that tricep. Now we're going to stretch the lower portion of our body. I like to start with this on our pigeon pose. And this is a great yoga pose. We're going to make sure to start with a vertical shin to our body, hands on the ground, and you can also lean further over if you need to. This is a great stretch for guys for stretching out that piriformis, which is your buttocks. It allows for more mobility, it allows us to get further and deeper into a squat, and it also opens up the hips. You'll see here I'm trying to minimize the space between the ground and my hips. This is the overall goal that I like to try to achieve when I'm working on this pigeon pose, to get that space between the ground and my hips as minimal as possible and get a nice deep stretch before we move into some activation. Now this is one of everybody's favorite stretches. You'll see this almost any gym that you visit. This is the couch stretch. We're going to start with securing our leg onto a surface, the lead leg that's not being stretched. I like to have start with a vertical shin. This is a really good stretch, guys, for stretching out that quad, hip flexors, and the hip as well. Once we are in this position, we can simply start to squeeze our buttocks together, pushing our hips forward to get a nice deeper stretch into this motion. This is one of the favorites before any type of squat motion I use. I highly recommend this for loosening up those quads, hip flexors, and hip. Now there are some people that struggle getting in this position due to balance. One thing I like to have them do is use a PVC pipe for assistance. This will help secure them in that upright position so they can still work on loosening up before going into activation. The calf stretch, we're going to start by placing our heel as close as we can to the rig. Now from here we're going to keep our knee nice and straight. We're going to secure onto the rig, leaning into it. This is going to allow for a nice deep stretch throughout our calf, making sure that the leg is kept fully extended at all times. We're not going to bend our knee for this particular stretch. Lean into the pole. You can do this static or dynamically, whatever's best for you. This is going to give you a nice deep stretch throughout that calf. Now that we've stretched out our calves, we're going to move on to our Achilles. The same setup is applied for this, heel close to the rig. Only this time we're going to bend our knee. From here, we can grab onto the anchor of the rig and try to pull our knee closer to the rig, or we can also put our weight onto the front of our knee, pushing our knee close to the rig. With this, you're going to feel a nice deep stretch throughout that Achilles, giving you more ankle flexion. Now we're going to move into the banded portion of this sequence for our ankles. We're going to get a lot of tension into the band. We're going to place the band at the top of the foot, right where the ankle tends to meet. From here, we're going to keep our foot flat on the floor. We can put weight onto our knee. We're going to drive that knee forward, getting as much flexion into that ankle as we can. I'm going to move my foot out here so that you can see the arch of my foot. You should maintain the arch of the foot just like you were if you were squatting in this portion. Don't allow this to collapse in where your feet becomes flat. This will enable bad habits later on in squatting, so make sure that we maintain that arch throughout this stretch. We're going to do some Spanish squats here. We're going to secure a band to the rig, and then we're going to put one leg in on time, just as we were putting on some pants. Now, this is a great exercise if you're an athlete that is having a very vertical shin on squats. This is going to help pull you forward. So once we get secured in, we're going to take a step back. The band's around the back of the knee. As you'll notice, as I squat, the band is pulling my knees forward. And we're going to do a few reps of these. Sometimes we'll do them with a pause, but this pulling forward is going to give me more dorsal flexion in the ankles, and it's driving those knees forward, allowing to open up the hips to get deeper into a squat. It's a great primer exercise that I always recommend, especially for those athletes that are squatting with a very vertical shin. Now we're going to do some goblet squats. I like to use these for dual purpose. The first one, of course, is to just work on a squat with a very upright chest in motion. As we drop, notice how I'm dropping my elbows in between my legs, not on the outside, not on top, but they're in between. The reason for this also is I like to sometimes stretch out my hips, thighs, and hip flexors with the goblet squats. So it's the same motion. Just as I drop, I'm going to place my elbows on the inside and drive my knees out. Notice how my feet don't move. This is going to create a lot of torque and tension in the hips. It should be the same type of tension you feel if you're doing a heavy back squat. So this is a good way to get athletes a feel for that nice tension in the hip. The reverse lunge. You see a lot of people doing normal lunges, but you don't see too many reverse lunges in a primer warm-up. I like to use the reverse lunge because it really helps me activate that posterior chain engagement, especially on those squatting days where I need to drive with my legs. All we're simply going to do is take a step back, drop the knee to the ground. Don't take too far of a step back so that you become off balance. I want you to stay balanced here.